Okay, good afternoon or good evening, ladies and gentlemen, family. I'm bringing to you this program, Combating Systemic Racism Through Education, our Friday night staple. Last week, we had Dr. Molefe K. Asante on, and through the scheduling difficulties, we weren't able to get the full measure of what he brings to the table. He says he'll come back in the spring. But we did have a glitch where, not knowing how long he was going to speak, we took up an inordinate amount of time, which should have gone to his intro, and on we go. So this week, we're not going to do that. We're going to make sure we get Mr. Bill May in, and he can tell you about himself, who he is, what he does, and his views about cultural anthropology, cultural appropriation, and about the music he has done, the photography work he has done, and some very, very interesting projects that he has going right now. Now, as we prepare for that, I would like to say that we want to play this piece for you. Well, Bill May is a connoisseur of every genre of music there is, and I thought that snappy little Despacito thing would be just the right thing to start us off with tonight. We're, as I said before, combating systemic racism through education. And we have a master educator to help us combat it, and through the musical arts. As such, I would like to introduce you to my former colleague and awesome brother in the struggle, Mr. William W. May. Brother May, you're on.
Okay, thank you very much, Sanford, and good evening, everybody. I'm coming to you from the state of Kentucky. It's my pleasure to be here and also to reconnect with a colleague from high school, and then we actually worked together in the same high school in Newark, New Jersey. We were both students at Southside High School, which is now known as Malcolm X Shabazz High School, and we reconnected as adults and professional educators at Weequahic High School in Newark. Sanford was teaching history there, and I came in there as a music teacher, and my role at the school was to teach a couple of sections of what's called Music Foundations, which is basically like a survey course. We would take the students through different types of music and the fundamentals of music, beginning with the staff, the 5 lines and 4 spaces, and so forth. And then we also would go through the history of music and different genres of music. I also taught at Weequahic. I was there to teach strings meaning violin, viola, cello, and bass, and to conduct the orchestra. And the orchestra would consist of those 4 stringed instruments plus the brasses and woodwind and percussion instruments. So this was the school at that time was predominantly, if not all, totally African American. During the time that I was growing up in Newark, and Mr. Sanford was growing up in Newark, it was a predominantly Jewish school, the community on the south ward of Newark, and some pretty famous names. So people came out of there, and I guess one of the names that may stand out to most people on this call is Philip Roth, the writer, but there were others. But I want to back up because Mr. Sanford, I'm so used to calling him Mr. Williams from our days where we were teaching that we wanted to be professional in front of the students. We didn't really call each other by first names, and I think some of you on this call are probably familiar with that concept. But Sanford asked me if I would go back to the beginning and kind of give you a biographical sketch of my life. So I'm going to try to do that, but I may be going back and forth a little bit. But I was born in 1946, and I was born in Alabama, as were my parents and 2 of my siblings. We, as a family, complete family, we all finally migrated or got to Newark, New Jersey, somewhere around about 1950-51. We came up, basically, up from Alabama to Newark in shifts, and I was part of the last shift to come up. Our dad had come up first before he was married, and then he went back to Alabama, got married, got drafted in the Army, and served his time in the Army, and I'll come back to that, more about that later. And then when he finished there, he came back to New Jersey, and that's where we all grew up. One sibling was born. But going back, we were born, we lived in the very southern part of Alabama, in Henry County, which is basically about an hour away, straight ahead to Florida, to the Florida Panhandle. My maternal grandmother was born in about, I think, 1867. She was born after the Civil War, and she was still born into a household that was governed and led by what now turns out to be, of course, my maternal great-grandfather, who was Scottish. And so basically my grandmother, Sally, was biracial, as were all of her siblings. Their complexion ranged from medium light to where they could easily pass for white. And she did have one brother who did pass for white. He left Alabama and never came back. A couple of her older brothers went to Ohio, and I've seen photographs of them, and they were easily identifiable as some person of color. My maternal grandfather, there was not that much mixing on his side, that side of the family, and that's the McHellen side of the family. My maternal grandmother's side of the family was the McGilvery folk, and again, we've traced that, we meaning my younger brother and myself, Gary, we've traced that back to Scotland, and we haven't gone beyond that because neither of us has the extended ancestry kit. But knowing that we got him from Scotland, that was sufficient for us. Now, again, going back to my father's side, the May side, there was not that much mixing of races on my paternal side of the family. His mother and her siblings that I've seen, well, I've actually only seen one, so singular, had really very strong black African characteristics. And so that's basically where we are with that. We, again, on my dad's side, there were, I think, 15 children, including one set of twins. And on my mother's family, there were about 10 children, and 2 of the children died in childhood, two males. And so it was just my mother, 2 other two of her male siblings, and her some sisters. If you check the census for the McHellen family, that was my mother's maiden name, and for the May family, you'll see that on each instance, the occupation was listed as farmer, which is a euphemism for sharecroppers. And I'm not sure how to put it, but there was a different type of sophistication on my maternal side as opposed to my paternal side. And I think it had to do with the fact that my mother was a light brown, and her siblings were also light brown, and they probably, especially the girls, as I've been told, the girls were brought up to be workers in homes, maids and so forth. The boys, they had to work in the fields. And somewhere along the line, and it's unclear how and where, there's a sense of a different taste or appreciation for fashion on my mother's side of the family. Now, not that my dad and his siblings were any slackers on that, but there was just a different way of viewing things. And one example of that is that on my mother's side, there are plenty of photographs, plenty of photographs of especially the girls in the family, the young ladies as they grew older, and of their children, those who did have children. There are lots of photographs of them. On my dad's side, there are very, very, very few photographs. And all of the photographs I've seen on my dad's side of the family, as from the time he was growing up, they were all maybe just someone had a camera going and went by and took a quick picture. On my mother's side of the family, there are plenty of professional studio photographs, and this is in Henry County, Alabama. The studio that did those photographs of the McCallum side of the family, I'm assuming he was an African American. I've not been able to find any information about him other than he had a studio in Dothan, Alabama. But again, there were plenty of studio photographs, and I've seen other photographs by that photographer of African Americans, and he actually had a studio because you can see the same background and props and benches and so forth of other African Americans. I've reached out to Deborah Willis through her sister, who's an archivist at Temple University, to try to find some information about the photographer, but nothing yet. Let me just go back and let's say that my dad was born in 1915. My mother was born in 1919. They're both deceased now, of course. They didn't make the centennial. Of course, what little education that was available through the Rosenwald schools by the time that they became school age. And the Rosenwald school had to do with Julius Rosenwald, who he and Booker T. Washington somehow had an acquaintance, and they came to whatever agreement. And Rosenwald helped in funding the building of schools for the coloreds there in Alabama and many of the southern states, and as far west as where I am now in Kentucky. And if you're not familiar with the Rosenwald schools, you can look it up, Julius Rosenwald. But the schools had a specific design because there was no electricity. There were big windows where the light could come in through into the schoolroom, the classroom, to provide light for the students in a learning situation. And of course, early on, they were all wooden frame schools, and they were painted, the outside, they were painted white. And some of the Rosenwald schools are still standing in the South. I think some certainly in North Carolina, and some in Alabama. And the teachers were black. And in the funding process, Rosenwald the Rosenwald Foundation did not provide all of the funding. It provided a matching funding, so to speak. So the African Americans in those communities, such as where my parents grew up in Alabama and Henry County, they had to some way supplement the funding that Rosenwald provided. So it was a joint venture. And again, if you do any research, you'll see Rosenwald and Booker T. Washington certainly meeting with each other and conversing with each other. And we all know that Booker T. Washington was at Tuskegee Institute. Now, one of my mother's sisters, Gertrude, was the only one of the McAllen girls to complete high school and go on to college. And she went to what was called the Alabama State Teachers College, or something like that. It has a different name now. And it was that during that time in the early 20th century, if you completed 2 years of college of normal school, you would be certified as a teacher. So my Aunt Gertrude was a teacher right there in Headland in Henry County, Alabama. And she actually was the person who tried to teach me how to read and to count. So I thank her for what she did for me. And I remember one time, after we had all the May family, we had all migrated to New Jersey. The usual thing was at the end of the school year, in where we lived in Newark, whatever day the school ended on in that week, that Saturday we were at Newark Penn Station with our mother, and our dad had sent us off to Alabama. So our mother would stay about a week, and then she would come back, and we would spend the rest of the summer there. And she would not come back to pick us up until a week before school started. 2 weeks, actually, because she would come back to stay a week, and then the second week she'd take us back to New Jersey. Fast forwarding a little bit, well, actually filling in some of the gaps. My mother only went to the 6th grade at it was then what was called the Henry County Training School, which actually only closed down about maybe 10 years ago. But it was not the segregated school that she attended. And my dad also attended the same school. Somewhere in there they met. And it may have been the fact, as has been kind of shared with me, that once he finished a certain grade, he, meaning my dad, he was the teacher. And that's probably how they met. Again, there's a 4-year difference in their ages, so you can easily see that could happen. After my dad graduated from the Henry County Training School, he went on and he spent a year at Tuskegee, majoring in music, because that was his gift. And when he was drafted into the Army, and he was in the 366th Infantry, and they were assigned during the Second World War to Italy. And my dad had the opportunity, because he could type and because he could play piano and organ. I'll come back to that. He was what was called Special Services. And he had, as he has shared with us, myself and my siblings, he never carried a gun in the Second World War in Italy, because he always had a field organ on his back, because he would play for church services, or religious services, I should say, and there were times when there would be funerals there in Italy for the African American soldiers who had been killed in battle. He would play there, but he also was given the responsibility of director of the Glee Club. So the 366th Infantry, and there's a photograph we have. Now, I've also posted it on Facebook in Italy, sometime in World War II, where my dad is standing with a priest.
When it comes on.
And, should I continue? Hello?
Yes, you can.
Oh, yes. I heard a voice. Okay.
I was inadvertent. Somebody, I think, that's quiet their music.
I'm sorry?
They muted. It was inadvertent, I suppose. You can continue.
Okay. I'll just up right there. This is in Italy, Second World War. He's standing outside of a Catholic church, and the members of the 366th Infantry Chorus, they're standing behind him and the priest. To the right of the priest is, when I was a little kid, when I first saw the picture, I thought it was a white guy, but it's not. It is Lieutenant Edward Brooke, who was from Massachusetts. And you may recall, if you're of a certain age, that Edward Brooke was, even though he was a black man, he was elected the Republican senator for the state of Massachusetts, and he served a couple of terms. And when he resigned, or he chose not to run for another term, John Kennedy ran for the seat and became the senator from Massachusetts, and later became president of the United States. Let's see what else might be of interest from that period. Not much I can think of at the moment, but if I think of something, I'll come back. So now we're in New Jersey, and we're in Newark, New Jersey, and it's still my mom, my dad, and it's me as that at that time, the youngest, and then next up above me is my sister Grace. She was born in I forgot. And then it was Earl. He was born in 1939. I think Grace was born just before, our dad went into the Army. So Earl was older, so he was in kind of like what we would call today middle school. Grace was in elementary school, and that summer it was a summer that September that I would enter elementary school, and that would be Monmouth Street School in Newark, Monmouth, and I remember crying and saying I didn't want to go to school. And my mother said, well, why don't you want to go to school? I said, the kids are going to laugh at me. The other kids will laugh at me. And she said, why do you think that? I said, because I can't read or can't write. And she just laughed and smiled. She said, you'll learn in school. And I did. And so I was enrolled in Monmouth Street School in kindergarten. And my kindergarten teacher was a black woman, and Mrs. Minnie Mosley. And at that time, there weren't that many teachers of color in the Newark Public Schools, and but Mrs. Moses was one of the few teachers, African American teachers in the district, and she passed. I'm going to say maybe 10 or 15 years ago. And I remember when I was an adult teaching at Weequahic High School, I would see her. There was an early childhood center across the street. And one day, I made it my business to go outside and see her. And when I saw her outside of her building, and I said, hello, Mrs. Mosley. And she just looked at me and smiled, and she said, hello, William May. And I said, well, how do you know me? She said, I remember your smile. But I'm now, at that point, I'm about 28 years old. I'm bald. I have a beard, and I'm wearing glasses. Well, the bald part I had when I was a kid, but I was amazed that she could remember me, and we did chat a while. But I want to get back to elementary school. I did okay. I did in elementary school. I got A's and B's because I was quiet, didn't bother anybody. My older brother Earl, and he moved on. And on the street where we lived, one of his best friends at that time was someone that, if you're in urban education, you've heard of him. His best friend was Joe Clark, Joe Lean On Me Clark, who was principal of Eastside High School in Paterson, New Jersey, and the film was made about him as a principal at Paterson Eastside High School. And one of the interesting things about that is that Joe went to a high school in Newark called Central High School, and at the time, and when it was first opened about 100 years ago, it was a commercial high school, and you actually learned a trade there. My brother Earl went to South Side. So Joe had to walk past our house on Quitman Street to get to Central, and Earl had to walk past his house to get to South Side. But that's the way the school system worked at that time. And for the most part, the African-American students were not really directed towards their neighborhood schools. They were directed towards a trade school. The trade schools, such as Central, they were better balanced racially than the other schools. Because if you were to see my brother Earl's yearbook, and he graduated from Southside in January of 1957, it's a predominantly white class, just the people who graduated there with him in that class. And then in June of 1957, it was the same thing. It was a lot different. It was the reverse when I graduated from Southside in 1964. My dad had started working. This is going back after the war. He had started working at the Veterans Administration in the finance department. I mean, even though he didn't have a degree, but that's where he worked, and he handled the numbers and, you know, the books and stuff like that. My mother worked, her first job that I remember, she wore rubber boots every day. And I'm like, why is she wearing rubber boots? And it wasn't until I was an adult and researching the city of Newark that I became aware why she wore rubber boots. And she worked in a place around the corner, about a block away from where we lived on Quitman Street. It was on Waverly Avenue, which is now Muhammad Ali Boulevard. And it was an ice cream and a dairy, whatever you want to call it, plant. And so the boots were necessary because there was a lot of water and dampness there. But for the most part, when my mother worked, she worked as a domestic. She did day work. She did day work where she would get car fare or bus fare and whatever the wage was for the day. And sometimes, depending on where she worked, she wouldn't get the car fare because the wife of the house would pick her up and bring her back home. So she didn't have a car fare. She didn't get back. So all she got was maybe the $10 a day. But again, our dad was working at the Veterans Administration, and he worked there for 40-plus years, white collar job. But as you may recall from early on in my rambling here, he had music skills, piano and organ. And even though he didn't get his dream that was mentioned in a document, a newsletter that came out from the United States Army, and I have a copy of it here, that his desire was to get a degree in music from Juilliard, but unfortunately he never did. But he did take classes at Seton Hall, and I actually have some of his textbooks that he used at Seton Hall here with me. But he started playing for a church in Newark, New Jersey, by the name of Mount Calvary Baptist Church. And he played for Mount Calvary for nearly 50 years before he left it. And he introduced, and this was told to me by others. I didn't know. I was just a little kid running around. But when I was an adult and my dad had passed, people would say, your dad was the person who brought George Frederick Handel's Messiah to the black churches in New Jersey. And all I know is we did the Messiah many, many years, often, as well as other cantatas at Christmas time and other cantatas at Easter time. And there are programs here in my house where my dad actually played organ recitals at different churches in the Newark area. And when the recitals, it wasn't gospel music, it wasn't maybe sometimes a spiritual, but it was the classical organ repertoire that you would find from music of Bach or other Baroque composers or other classical composers. But when it came to Sunday morning and it was like a concert. After the choir, and some of you who may be Baptist, as I am, you may recall back then, the choir didn't just get in the choir loft. They marched then, and they would march in every Sunday on Holy, Holy, Holy. And then there would be a hymn or two. Then there would be gospel, and then there would be an anthem, a piece of classical music. Again, Hallelujah from the Mount of Olives by Beethoven, something like that. And then the invitational hymn, that is after the sermon and the minister calls for people to join the church, would always be something very, very soulful. Could be a kind of an up-tempo hymn, or it could be some, just your good old gospel music. And because of my dad's background in music, we, meaning myself and my siblings, we were privileged to hear all kinds of music in our home. I mean, anything that was musical, we heard it. We heard it on the radio. We heard it on the record player, the hi-fi. And what probably was most impressive to me is we heard our dad playing piano in our home to accompany singers. And they were singing spirituals. They were singing from the classical repertoire. And these are all African-American singers, male and female. And if you were to close your eyes, you couldn't tell whether you were listening to a black person or a person of any other ethnicity. But that's what we heard at home, Monday through Friday. My dad being, an Alabama boy, he was up at 5 o'clock to get to his job at 8 o'clock, which only took him about 20 minutes to get to. But I woke up every week, Monday through Friday, to WCBS, to the Jack Sterling show, and where there was actually live musicians there, and they would play jazz on that early morning show with Jack Sterling, and he would play, the records of that time, Rosemary Clooney, people like that, and even once in a while, a little Roy Hamilton, and the few blacks who were in that, singing that kind of music. And somewhere in there, my younger brother Gary was born, and Earl, my older brother, and my Grace, my older sister, their only musical output was that they sang in the church choir. Gary, as he developed, not only sang in the church choir, he was in a little group, and they thought they were going to be the Temptations and and things like that. But because of the cantatas that our dad produced twice a year, Gary became the tenor soloist in many of those performances. Me, back up a little bit. My dad recognized the fact that I was interested in music, and he had a friend of his, an Army buddy, who played piano, and he asked him, and we call his friend Uncle Kenny. We asked Uncle Kenny to teach me to play the piano. I was more interested in playing baseball, and I didn't get to the piano. It just didn't work for me. But in the fourth grade, and in the Newark Public Schools, you had the option, or you were given the opportunity, to play a musical instrument, and my choice was the trumpet. And I remember the music teacher, Mr. Louis Sutera, and he said, and he didn't call me Bill, he didn't call me William, he called me Willie. Go figure. And he said, Willie, I don't have any trumpets. Why don't you play a violin until I get a trumpet? And that was in the fourth grade, and from the fourth grade through seventh grade, while I was at Mama Street School, trumpet players came and went. I never got a trumpet. I always had the violin. And then I went on to junior high school. I continued to play violin at a junior high school that I named West Kenny High School, junior high school. It's now called something. It's called Newark Tech or something like that now. Then we moved from the Central Ward to the other side of town. We were moving up to the South Ward, and I transferred to what was then called Clinton Place Junior High School. The school had opened in 1958. West Kenny had opened a year later in 1959. They were both junior high schools, but in different parts of the city. When I got to Clinton Place, I introduced myself to the music teacher, Mr. Gabriel Navola, and I told him who I was. And he said, "Oh, yes, Mr. Tutera, my brother-in-law told me you were coming." And he said, "Hold up your left hand." And I held up my left hand. He said, "Oh, that's a good-sized hand. I don't have any violin, but how about..."
I thought he was going to swear you in.
Playing the viola. And that's what I did. I played viola, which is like the violin, but it's like, in comparing it to the human voice, the violin is the soprano voice, like a female soprano. The viola is like the female voice alto. And that's what I did through junior high school. And while there at junior high school, I met a bunch of guys who were into jazz. And so I said, "Hey, I can't play violin and viola and jazz." Little did I know about people like Sven Asmussen and Stuff Smith at that time. So during the summer of 1961, right after I graduated from junior high school, going into high school, I started playing the bass. And I continued playing bass until present time. There's a whole lot of stuff in between. And when I got into my senior year, well, actually before I got into my senior year, I started taking private lessons on the bass, and in preparation for college, and got a scholarship to Montclair State, what's now Montclair State University, and that's where I went. I wanted to go to an HBCU, but they didn't offer any money, and I didn't. And even though I accepted to Howard and Fisk, Virginia State, I didn't go there. I went to again a local college in New Jersey. Now all of my buddies went to Howard, and the downside of that is only one of them stayed there long enough to get through part of his second year, and they all got drafted and went to Vietnam. And fortunately, they all came back alive, and, at least physically. But once I was, again, as a music major at Montclair State, and I was playing around New Jersey, gigging around with no formal training as a jazz musician, but as playing the tunes like everybody else, listen to it and play it, and learning how to read chord changes and listen and hear chord changes. That's what I did for my high school years and into college. And in the summer between my junior and senior year in college, I decided to join the Musicians Union. I did that because wherever we played in Newark, when I say we, meaning the guys I was playing, they were all black, and we were playing jazz. They were all union houses, and at that time, if you didn't have a union card, the union had the authority to pull you off the job, and you couldn't get paid. And so everybody, when they saw the union guy coming, who happened to be an African American, he was, and that's another whole story concerning the Musicians Union, because there was, parenthetically, there was the Musicians Union. For example, Newark, but Newark was not, or Essex County, was not separated by charter as many locals were. For example, Washington, D.C., Kansas City, Kansas City, Missouri, Chicago. They were all, by charter, they were segregated. So there was a white local and there was a black local. The white musicians could play at the black institutions, But the black musicians, like Charlie Parker, couldn't play at the white venues. But that's the way it was then. But it changed in about 1962. The locals were, on paper, integrated. But Newark, for example, was never by a charter a segregated musicians local. It was by de facto. And that, the black musicians knew where we could play and where we couldn't play. However, in the summer of 1967, that's when I joined the union. And at that time, you had to audition. So I auditioned, and I played a double bass transcription, because I'm a bass player, of a Bach unaccompanied cello suite. I played part of the first movement. And the president of the union, was part of the auditioning community, and all the other people present was white. I was the only black person in the room. And at the end of the audition, after I played and answered the questions that were asked, he said, "I want you to do me a favor." He said, "Tomorrow," because it was on a Tuesday night that I was there, "I want you to go over to Branchford Park, and I want you to listen to the Newark Symphony, and you tell me, if you can play that music or not." And so I did. And what happened after that was that I got my union card, and I started getting calls as a union musician, but classical jobs. And at that time, there was so few African Americans in the local, and there's a photograph that I have. It shows me and Alfred Patterson, who was one of the other black American in the orchestra. And so we were in that orchestra together, and Alfred was also playing with the New Jersey Symphony, and the Newark Symphony was just the New Jersey Symphony on summer break. But Alfred had the time to do the New Jersey Symphony during the school year, but I had a regular. Now, I was still in school as a student, but for the rest of my performing career, I was, in many instances, the only African American on the job. And again, I was doing through the union only classical stuff. It gets a little. There's a whole lot more, and I don't want to kind of jump ahead of myself. But from there, I started performing in New York, and I could still perform in New York City or New York State as a New Jersey musician from local 16 at the time, and I could perform in the 802 because I was a musician, but I couldn't perform on a regular basis. I could perform, from time to time, and met a lot of musicians. Sanford, how am I doing on time? Sanford, you still there? Anybody there?
Yes, we here.
Okay.
You're good on time, Bill.
Okay.
Yeah, you're the man on this, please.
All right. I got so quiet there. I didn't want to be talking to myself. I usually don't talk this long, and I also talk faster. Now, I want to just back up a little bit. No, really not back up. Somewhere in there, I graduated from college in 1968. The young lady I married at the time, because we had known each other since we were about 4 or 5 years old, and we didn't consider dating until we were in our senior year in college, and kind of a little bit of how small the world is. My dad was a minister of music at Mount Calvary. By this time, it was Mount Calvary Missionary Baptist Church in Newark. My she's my ex now, ex-wife, the one I'd known since about 4 or 5 years old. Her dad was the minister of the church, so I guess it was destined. It was meant to be. But it gets a little crazier than that, because my dad had been playing for churches in Alabama before he came to New Jersey, and he and Reverend Mapson, that's Reverend Jesse Wendell Mapson Sr., had met in Alabama. And they ended up, like about 40 or 50 years together at the same church, in the same capacity. Reverend Mapson as minister, my dad as minister of music for all those years, and so forth and so forth. But anyway, let's see, where was I? Oh, I finished college. I just jumped a whole bunch of years. I finished college, and now I started teaching in the elementary school. I had 5 elementary schools, and I was teaching instrumental music. And I was playing one of my symphony jobs with the Newark Symphony, and this fellow who was a music teacher at Weequahic and Sanford remembers him, Fred Ransom. Now, Fred Ransom is a story unto himself. The brother is from Arkansas, and was a Fulbright fellow, and he studied in Germany and France, an outstanding tenor voice. But he was now back he was in New Jersey, and he was teaching, and he was performing with the Newark Orchestra, and he just said to me at the break, he said, who are you and where are you from? Because he had never heard of me. I had never heard of him. And I told him, I said, well, I'm, Bill May, and I teach in, these elementary schools. And he said, well, we have a music major at Weequahic High School, and we could use you. So, long story short, that next year, at the beginning of the 72, 73 school year, I think it was, I started teaching at Weequahic, and that's when I, again, had that 5 classes a day, a couple of classes of music foundations or general music, and then the strings class and orchestra. So I was doing that. And at the same time, I was hustling into New York a couple of nights a week to Hunter College to finish up, to earn a master's degree in music education. And when I finished that, I was still at Weequahic and still gigging, just playing classical music, no jazz, wishing I could play jazz. But part of what I was teaching in that music foundations class, I would always teach a unit on jazz. And I couldn't find photographs of jazz musicians. And just one more thing is that when I finished my master's, I had a lot of free time on my hand, and there was a position open on staff for an advisor to the school newspaper, so I applied for the position, and I got it. And I couldn't get photographs that I needed for the school newspaper in a timely manner, and it occurred to me, well, I'll buy a camera. And then once I had the camera, and I said, gee, I can take the same camera and go into the clubs and take pictures of jazz musicians. And that's what I did. And that's how my career as a photographer started. I was like 28 years old, and one of the first things I did, I was taking pictures. Well, I saw in the newspaper where some jazz musicians, like Larry Ridley and James Spaulding and some others, and the Copacetics. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that group, the tap dancers, brothers way back. They were doing a performance at Rutgers, Newark, at the Paul Robeson Center. So I went, and I introduced myself to Larry Ridley, and told him I would like to take pictures. And he said, since you want to do that, I have a series down at the Rutgers campus in New Brunswick, and I would like for you to come down there. So I started taking pictures there, and I took pictures, almost it's like a who's who of jazz that I photographed there. Oh, and by that time, I had moved away from my little rangefinder that, it was just a little point-and-shoot camera. I had moved on to a Nikon, so I thought I was big time. And did all that. But in that same year, and this was 1974 now, that was in like maybe January of 74, and I had kind of put the bass aside a little bit, but a buddy of mine from junior high school that I used to play jazz with was telling me about a jazz bass player by the name of Paul West, who was the music director at the Henry Street Settlement House in New York on the Lower East Side, had a symphony orchestra, and he needed a bass player. And I said, no. Yeah. Anyway, long story short, I finally went, and it's like unbelievable that I went there that one night, and from that point on until just a couple of years ago, when I said, I'm done, my phone never stopped ringing in terms of symphony gigs between New Jersey and New York. And not only symphony and opera gigs, but playing Broadway shows. So it's been good to me. God has been good, and I just don't laugh it off or slough it off. Let's see. What else do you want to know? What else can I tell you about myself? Well, I'm retired.
Go
ahead.
The photos, the history with the photos in the library.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, after again, I've been doing these photographing jazz musicians, plus I've been documenting the history of the city of Newark and changes in the city of Newark. And one of the things that I've done in that sequence is that Newark has a lot of what are called storefront churches, and they're fascinating. They fascinated me, and I would get up early in the morning at the crack of dawn, and if there was a little light, enough light for me to get a picture, I was driving around the city, mostly in the Central Ward, the area where.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry?
I just said Central Ward, like Springfield Avenue and Central Avenue in the middle.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. And if you go to my website, I'll give you the website now if you want to see some. It's just www.williamwmay.net.
Okay.
And you can see some of the storefront churches. There's a space there just dedicated to that as well. But most of the pictures on there are from the jazz series. But anyway, I started getting all the expensive equipment. There was a radio station in Newark that was dedicated to the Newark Public Schools. It was a Newark Public Schools radio station and had come into existence in the late 1940s, WBGO. And the district, the Newark Public Schools, took that radio station where, I don't know if Sanford ever listened to it, but it was always in the classroom. We could hear things about science. We could hear things about history. We could hear music, everything. In 1979, the Newark Board of Education sold the license. I was banging on the table. I'm sorry about the banging on the table. They sold that license to a group that represented NPR, National Public Radio. And WBGO, since that time, more than 40 years now, closing on 45 maybe, has been the jazz station of the nation. Mm-hmm. It has the longest running time of any jazz station. But anyway, I had been taking pictures of jazz musicians. So one day, after school, I just went in there and said, "Hi, my name is Bill May. I take pictures of jazz musicians. Here's my portfolio." And I met Darthon Kirk. At the time, she was a widow of the late Rosson Roland Kirk. And she looked at me like, you must be some kind of crazy man coming into my office with all that stuff. But we are now the best of friends. And so I became the unofficial, official, unpaid WBGO photographer. And by that, I was able to get access to such an incredible, all the venues in New York. And I have as you will see on the website, I have just an incredible history of music, of jazz in the New York metropolitan area. And I saw something today online from Lincoln Center, one of the concerts that was part of the Lincoln Center Jazz Series before it became the big series it is now, where Lincoln Center was only testing the waters and it would only give about 10 days during the summer for classical jazz at Lincoln Center. That's what it was called. Now it's called Jazz at Lincoln Center. They have their own building and everything. So, I mean, it's just incredible history. The photographs that were on display on exhibition at the Newark Public Library, that was only supposed to last 1 month, for the month of February of this year. That show was not taken down until the beginning of September. I mean, it was that popular. I have to tell you, I never thought it, because when there was the opening night, I was here in Kentucky, and I had just moved here, and I wasn't going to get on anybody's plane. I wasn't going to drive. All I did was put my computer, and I was virtual. 2 people were there, Darthon Kirk, and then I forget the fellow's name from Rutgers, Newark. So we had a nice conversation, and it's that exhibition for the most part was jazz musicians with Newark roots or Newark connections. And one of the people in the exhibition was the once upon a time mayor of Newark, Ken Gibson.
Oh, yes.
Ken Gibson played alto saxophone in the same big band as Wayne Shorter. And I interviewed, we still refer to him as Mayor Gibson. I interviewed him after he was mayor and saw his photograph. There's Wayne up top. And Wayne was playing, he wasn't playing tenor saxophone. I think he was playing clarinet. But Ken was playing alto saxophone in the front row. And Wayne's brother was also playing in the band. But that whole era with Gibson playing and some of the others playing, like Melba Moore, stepdad, Clem Mormon, they're called the Newark Jazz Elders, and you'll see them on my website. And not to bore you too much more, somewhere along the line, I started shooting video, and so there's video of that on the website also. And you can see this stuff. Just put my name, either Bill May or William W. May. You can see some of it on YouTube. I have to go back because I skipped 20 years of my career in the school system. I was vice principal at Peshine Avenue School for a few years, and then I was vice principal at Science High School in Newark for about 5 years, and then I went to Shabazz as vice principal for a year and a half, and from there I moved to central office to the position of director of visual and performing arts for the district, and that's where I spent the last 10 years of my career at the Newark Public Schools as director of visual and performing arts. And from the time that I had been a student in the district until the time I became director of visual and performing arts, there had been dramatic decline in the arts period in the district. And Dr. Bolden, who actually had been a classmate at Southside, she graduated in June of 64. She graduated January of 64, and I graduated June of 64, and we started Montclair State together. Well, she became the superintendent of schools, and she came to me. Well, before she became superintendent, she was an assistant superintendent for secondary programs, and she came to me and said, we have an opening for the director of visual performing arts, and he interviewed for it, which I did. And let me back up. I saw the announcement. I interviewed, and then she came to me. And when she came to me, she came to tell me, and this is like the day before the beginning of the winter break in 1997. And she said, you are now the director of visual and performing arts. And then she became 2 years later, and I say we because it wasn't just me. We were able to produce an annual marching band festival. And first of all, we only had 2 functional high school marching bands when I started. That was Hassan Williams and the Malcolm X Shabazz band there, Malcolm X Shabazz. And then, it'll come to me. As well as I knew his name from Weequahic High School. Well, Michael Page. They were the only 2 functional marching bands. And we built the program up to have marching bands in all of the comprehensive high schools. We even formed what we call the Millennium Band, where we took all of those high school marching bands, and we called it the Millennium Band. And the title of that band came from Mr. Hassan Williams, the late Hassan Williams. I don't know if Hanford remembers him. But so Hassan, named the band. And we would, as a unit, when all those bands, the color guard and the twirlers, the different color uniforms, we would march and through a Somerset, Somerset, New Jersey, and you see a couple of hundred kids, instruments and everything, coming down the street, marching together. Black kids, white kids, Latinos, Latinas. It was awesome. Get excited thinking about it. Anyway, we also created an annual jazz band festival because we started hiring people. It was my philosophy. I found that too many of the staff members that were there to teach, they were music teachers or listed as music teachers or listed as art teachers. They only had an undergraduate degree in that content area, but they didn't do anything professionally. They sang in the church choir and they were growing up, and then they went to college at one of the local colleges and got a degree. So they didn't have the performance experience. But because of the fact that I was still performing and still involved with photography, I knew a lot of the people, and I started getting professionals who had a degree in the arts content area, plus the pedigree by the fire baptized because they're artists, as a visual artist or piano, performing artists. That's how we started teaching them. The program grew. The next step was I convinced Dr. Bolden that we needed, I didn't really have to do much convincing because the state standards for visual and performing arts included dance. And the only school in Newark that had a dance program was Arts High School. And like me, I don't know where to get in the kids to the dance program at Arts High School. So we created an elementary school program. Cindy Nicholson, I'm getting in trouble now mentioning names. Susan Pope and I'll think of her name. She's great. As a matter of fact, I just posted something on Facebook that she did a video. Janelle Smith-Reed. They were the first 3. So then after principals, elementary school principals, saw how the dance program could be an integral part of the whole education, of educating the whole child, more of the elementary school principals found funding for dance. The same thing happened before that with the New Jersey Symphony, where we created the Newark Early Strings program, where we start the youngsters in selected schools, a test program at first, in the 3rd grade, and we had funding with the little half-size violin, and we had coaches, the musicians from the New Jersey Symphony Orchestra would come in and coach our teachers at the elementary level who were teaching those instruments, and they would also teach the kids. So we had these these young third graders. They didn't perform until they got into the fourth grade, and we would perform at NJ Pack. All of this is recorded via video, by the way, and some of it's already at the Newark Public Library. And I have in the room next to me, or the hallway next to me, I have 5 more boxes of stuff to put into the mail next week. Video, stills, all of this. But we would put things in the arts program that other school districts outside of Newark in the wealthy areas, they were doing. And we were noticed that, we were not just doing, we weren't fooling around. Our teachers were serious. They were professionals. Our students were professionals. The first time the kids in the Suzuki, that early strings program, the first time they performed at Newark Symphony Hall in one of our annual concerts. And you see all these kids come out there, white tops, black bottoms, the violin is tucked under the arm. And when the first 10 kids came out, and they kept coming and coming, the audience started applauding and stood up just to see all of these little kids standing on stage. It was an awesome sight. And then Alan Lieb, who was the consultant, he was there. He did all the stuff. The pianist played the chord, bum bum, and all of the violinists leaned forward and bowed. I mean, that's the first thing you do, because and then boom boom, they go back, and then they played. They played, and parents were telling me, he said they were in tears. They were so happy to see their children doing what they know other children are doing in other school systems. And we led the way. Well, at least for a while. Unfortunately, so much of that is gone. It wasn't just after I left. And that's because, I not want to do any finger pointing, it was a different focus. And speaking of different focus, the Suzuki program, the early strings program, had a consultant out of Columbia University who did his research in schools. Had little charts and do like all that stuff the researchers do, and it was shown, proven, and I have it in my files here, and that's at the library also, that those youngsters in the Newark Early Strings program had the best attendance in their schools. They had the parents were more involved in school, and those were the kids who had the higher, standardized test scores. And most of those youngsters, if they didn't go to arts high school, they went to technology high school or to a school outside of Newark. Yeah, I mean, so we had the cream of the crop, and they were the cream of the crop. And we had more that didn't get into the program. But those were the youngsters, and there were lots of them, hundreds of them, who had the opportunity that others didn't have. One of the people who came out of that not out of the Suzuki program, now this is another piece, the Star Ledger created what they called the Star Ledger Performing Arts Scholarship. And it was open to students, any student in the Newark High School, a senior. There was one each year. There was one scholarship valued at $40,000, and there were 2 others valued at $20,000. The first person to receive that $40,000 scholarship is a young man by the name of Tyshawn Sorey. And if that name doesn't mean anything to you, Google it right now, and make sure you're sitting down when you Google that. Google his name. The young man is writing operas that are being produced around the world. He has, I don't know how many CDs, and we're not talking about he's 50 years old or 60 years old. I think Tyshawn may be maybe 40 now, if that old. But he came out of that and went straight into, he used that $40,000 to do his undergraduate work. Then he got fellowships to do his other work after that. Just last year or the year before, he was the artist in residence at the Philadelphia Opera Company. Like I said, when you Google him, make sure you're sitting down. And by the way, he's Dr. Sean Sorey. And he still gigs as a jazz musician, but his bread and butter, writing 20th and 21st century symphonic music. Okay, did I bore you enough?
That's not a bore, Brother May. It's exciting.
Okay.
And it's significant, and you did good work there in Newark.
Yeah.
I'd like to take this time to thank you for such a beautiful rendition of what it was that you did in Newark and New York and about the places. The question, though, about people may not get the full understanding of this. You said that you started doing photography. Now, what year was that you started doing the photography?
It was 1973.
Okay, so you...
I'm sorry, go ahead.
You were at Weequahic High School then, you're saying?
That's correct. And I started because Bob Poschel, had the photography club, and he gave me some tips on where to get equipment. And I started taking pictures of like football games and basketball games. And then I went into the beginning of 1974 is when I started photographing jazz musicians.
Now, who is Bob Poschel?
Oh, I thought you would remember him from Weequahic. He was one of the music teachers. He played trumpet.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. Well,
was he pretty good?
Oh, yeah. Oh, well, see, I remember him from the days before I came to Weequahic, and there was a place in Newark. At first, it was called the Loft. It was right there in a former factory, a warehouse, on the corner of Shipman Street and William Street, right in back of Arch High School. That's the whole story about jazz in Newark. And so it was like you could go in there and hang out with the musicians and play and jam, and then from when the lease ran out for the Loft, it moved to the basement of the same building, and that's where I met Bob Poschel, because he would come. He was the only white guy there, and then I met him at Weequahic after that. But he was taking pictures of jazz musicians himself, as well as when he was at Weequahic, he took pictures of the kids. So a lot of the pictures in the yearbook were done by Bob Poschel.
Now, did you take pictures of the students at Weequahic High School too? Yeah.
Once I started, and I started because I needed pictures for the Calumet, the school newspaper. Then the class advisors would ask, could we use your pictures? Sure. And I took lots and lots of pictures. Again, some of the stuff is already at the Newark Public Library. 5 boxes are sitting out in the hallway next to me. They go via UPS next week. And in that, you may not have noticed me because of all the stuff that was going on. I took pictures of Farrakhan and the people you brought into the building. All those people who spoke to Mal Good, Amiri Baraka. So that's all in those files that are either out in the hallway, boxed up, or already at the library.
I must say, this is, I don't know, say, well, God is good, or say that we had good fortune, or whatever, but prior to a week ago, I hadn't heard anything from you. I sort of remembered you took pictures, but I didn't know there were that many pictures, and it was copiously done as that. But when you made a note that you had recalled these people, and because some of it's not in the yearbook, A lot of people probably were wondering, well, did all this ever really happen? But I guess we're here to say that it did happen.
It did happen, and now here's the dilemma. Back when I was shooting the stuff, it was all film, and it had to be developed, and so I shot mostly black and white. So I was developing at home. Mm-hmm. Now, that's what's sitting in the hall, the film, and I gave up on a dark room when I retired in 2008. I wasn't doing any more dark room work because everything was digital, and if I needed a negative, I would scan the negative, but I wasn't scanning anything from Weequahic. I was scanning my jazz stuff. So all of that and all those programs with the people you brought in, some I mentioned, some I've forgotten, all of that. All of that is negatives. So the library has that. They're going to scan that. I don't know what their timetable is. And some may be already scanned. I don't know. Because, again, I just moved it on to them because I don't have the time to, and I'm talking about, almost like 7 or 8 years of shooting at Weequahic High School, all film. And that's what's in the box.
Well, in terms of that, then it's interesting that you would do that because that means that the Newark Public Library is going to have that, and they're going to how do you say, they're going to develop it? Is that the term?
Scan it.
Or you're going to scan it, mm-hmm. And then once they scan it, the citizenry can simply ask for copies of it or whatever it might be, and be able. Mm-hmm.
You can do that. I mean, that's why they have it, because they have a way of getting. If you go to the website right now and you put in my name, you're going to see some photographs. So they scan it and they post it on their website, and things that they don't post, it's in their files, and I don't know where they are in the process in terms of how much of the Weequahic stuff or any of the high school stuff. Because I shot at Shabazz. I shot when I was at Westside, and I shot when I was for Visual Performing Arts. And when I was there, that's when digital came along. Mm-hmm. And that's during my time as director of Visual Performing Arts. Like halfway through that 10-year period. Yeah.
That 10-year period, then, it seems to me that there was a renaissance or rebirth in the visual arts department while you were there. Not to get you to pat yourself on the back, but it seemed to me it had been going downhill for years and years. And you're saying that under the aegis of Dr. Bolden and your stick-to-itiveness and dedication, you were able to move it right on back up past where it was. Now, the rest of this. Now, whose idea was it to form this? And basically, why was it formed? Because it sounds pretty awesome to me in terms of saving and protecting, or let's say preserving, this beautiful history that we have in Newark.
Oh, okay. Dr. Bolden became superintendent. Again, and that was probably in my second year as director of Visual Performance. Then she had the opportunity to really get around to the schools. Before, she had been assistant superintendent for secondary programs or something. But she had the opportunity to see more as superintendent. And she realized people were throwing the history of the district in the trash because they didn't know what else to do with it. And she formed that Newark Public Schools Historical Preservation Committee while she was still superintendent. And it wasn't until after she became superintendent that we really became a 501c. In that building where my office was, 15 State Street. Pause. Well, for a short period of time, that's where James Miller Baxter was principal of the colored school. That's an historic building. And he retired in 1909 and passed shortly after that. And the building was used all kinds of stuff since that time. But one day, while I was, maybe halfway through my time, I'm going through everything, pulling open every drawer and opening doors that have spider webs, because nobody's ever opened them for 100 years. Well, I found a stack of 8 by 10 glass negatives. I don't know, that may not mean anything to you, but think of James Van Der Zee, what James Van Der Zee used as for taking pictures. Think of Matthew Brady and his crew that took pictures of the Civil War. That big camera and that big thing that was sticking in the back. That's what I found. And they were photographs of early Newark education. I mean, I hugged those things to my breast, okay? And I walked them down the state to 2 Cedar Street because it's about a 2-mile walk, and I would always walk. That was my physical exercise. And I hand delivered those to Dr. Bolden because they were that valuable. They had that history, and it showed the arts program in New York at the then when Madison Square Garden was really square down on the original building. Our Newark students were there. None of them were black. But they were there. I mean, it was a different era. Mm-hmm. So it was Dr. Bolden's idea, and it is such a great idea, and the material, the ephemera that's there is mind-boggling.
Okay, well, you're talking music, but now it seems that not only are you doing the jazz part, and the other colorful kinds of things, you have other things going on there because I don't know if you thought of it before or after you heard me in that female tap meeting the other day. And that was a happen Fan's chance. Could you hit on that for a moment? Because I hadn't seen you for years and years and years.
Okay, just clarify that for me again. I'm not sure what you're talking about.
Well, you actually... You were talking to Henry McLeod, and
okay.
He told you that there was a program on, and you tapped into it. And is that when you decided to do something about me putting something there for posterity, or what? Because I wouldn't have been doing it otherwise. Who would have been doing that?
Well, for me, let me just put it this way. A lot of people that I don't know, and didn't even know they were present and seeing me in different venues. They speak to me. They have spoken to me, and they would say, "Oh, you're the historian with a camera," because I just take pictures because I was attracted to that something about. And I guess it's because of the change in Newark, but I just felt compelled to photograph this stuff. Again, and so that's some of the stuff that's going to the library. Now, there is a body of work related to that's what I'll be working with myself. It's a Newark that used to be. And eventually that will get to the library, but it's not going to be in the stuff that's going to be mailed next week, and maybe a month from now there'll be more. But that's well, I call it my Newark that I have. And I mentioned video. Well, I started doing video, while I was director of Visual Performing Arts because Howard Best was always around shooting stuff, but he couldn't be every place. Of course, he had to cover this, cover that. So I bought a with the school budget. I bought a video camera and started doing my own video. And that's how I got into video. That's why you can see videos on my website, and in some of the material that I'm delivering to the library is video. So I don't know if the library has anyone who can do some editing to pull out some clips to show, but that's on them. So,
well,
I think we're just documenting the history from out of fun and interest.
So it's evolved into some more than that, because I would never have been involved in a project like that. It seemed to me, though, that what I was doing was historic, but if it weren't for you, a lot of people might be going around saying, well, this guy made a lot of this stuff up. He made it seem more significant than it was. And that was your idea, and now it's included, and we've done some taping, and we're going to do more taping, but the idea is in one's own voice, one states the issue, and of course you can listen to and do your research on and Google things, and when people make statements, you can always find out whether there's truth or not truth there. Through the referencing and cross-referencing. I think it's a brilliant idea, and I salute you for that.
Yeah. Well, again, I think, when you pull back and look at history and how things are created, you'll find that somebody is doing the same thing over there, and somebody's doing it over there, and then you come together. That's what we've done with Dr. Bolden and the Newark Public Schools Historical Preservation Committee. I mean, we could use a lot of help. And I just have to back up to tell you, I mentioned James Miller Baxter a few minutes ago, and him being principal of the colored school. Mm-hmm. Well, we have, and I say we, because we have been in contact with a grandson, and we have this. There's an incredible amount of information that we have gathered on James Miller Baxter, who was really not the first colored principal in Newark. There was one before him under different circumstances. But James Miller Baxter, his background is something else, and the fact that he hit it at the right time once he finished at the Quaker school there in Philadelphia, and he came straight to Newark. But boxes and boxes of actual material that he handled is available. I mean, we have it.
Now
to scan. We. In one box, there was a whole bunch of negatives shot, 100 years ago. I had the opportunity to scan those negatives, and it was unbelievable what I saw. And you have the Baxter family hanging out on the beach in Atlantic City. And then you have the Baxter family farm up in Bedminster, up in Morris County. And the farm, and then his one son was a veterinarian. The Baxter story is a story to be told. And you, as a track runner, in the Baxter family, it's not one of Baxter's sons. It's like a cousin. Was one of the first Olympic gold medalists, again, at the turn of the century. He lived in Philadelphia. His last name is Baxter. I can't think of his first name right now. And there's a book. I'll send you the name of the book. I'm going away from Newark. This is like, because the history is so fantastic, and you're lighting up those synapses in my head that make me remember some of this stuff that's been not only filed away in a closet someplace, but filed away in a closet in my mind. Come on.
So, from James Miller back to was this man an African American?
Yes. Oh,
my goodness.
I'm sending you some stuff for today. I'm sending you some stuff tomorrow.
Okay.
I'm going to see a picture of him.
Mm-hmm. And Somerset County, you say? They had a farm, you say?
And yeah.
Mm.
And in Bedminster.
And Bedminster.
Nobody bothered them. It was like the norm. I mean, there were pictures. Oh my Lord! But Dr. Baldwin is involved in a whole lot of stuff. And we were supposed to. I don't know if you're familiar. I know you are. The Newark Historical Society, and they do the Zoom sessions like once every other month or something. We were supposed to present last year, but it never happened. I mean, it is fascinating. That's all I can say. It's fascinating.
Okay, so I think what we want to do is throw open the floor for discussions and questions, because I'm sure there are many.
Okay.
So please, folks, unmute yourselves, and let's see what we're going to do with this. And Brother May is here to answer your questions.
Brother Williams.
Yes.
God, I want to thank Brother May for that presentation. Learned quite a bit. History, very impressed. And I always respect jazz photographers. I love the way they take pictures and all. I wanted to ask him, Brother May, what was your favorite picture of a jazz artist?
Excuse me. I'm not going to say I have a favorite picture, jazz artist, but I'll tell you a photograph that a lot of people like, and it's one I did of the singer actress Abby Lincoln. Are you familiar with her?
Yes, I have her music.
Okay, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I think that one may be on my website, but people love that photograph, right? And I mean, not because I took it, it's because it's Abby, and it was a press conference, and at Lincoln Center, and she was wearing this flowing white dress and a big white hat, and I mean, she just glowed. And I said, Miss Lincoln, is it okay if I photograph you? And I put her right there along the wall, the marble wall at Lincoln Center, and it's stunning. And people love it. I mean, there are others I like, but that's the one that people tend to talk about most of all.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. I have to see that one. Yeah, okay, well, and I didn't know that Mayor Gibson played the sax.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I knew I learned this evening.
Yeah, that one, you can find that on it's on Facebook. I posted it on Facebook some time ago, yeah. I mean, him playing, not the big picture I was talking about where he was in the band with Wayne Shorter.
You say it again?
I said the picture of Mayor Gibson playing the saxophone is on Facebook someplace on my Facebook page. It's not the one that I talked about with the band where he was playing with Wayne Shorter.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I didn't take the picture with him with Wayne Shorter.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm. But I did take pictures of Wayne Shorter. That again, people love it.
Yeah, Wayne Shorter, great musician.
Mhm.
Yeah, I have a lot of his music. Really enjoyed him. Yes, I just wanted, again, thank you for all that great information. Very interesting, brother.
And thank you for your conversation, your questions. Yes, thank you.
You're welcome, my brother.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you, Brother Rashad. Anyone else?
Brother Rashad.
Hello?
Brother Rashad.
Yes.
Hello?
You speaking to me?
Yes, I was just getting ready to say, if I'm not mistaken, Brother Rashad is also, yes, Brother Rashad, and I was getting ready to say, aren't you also a photographer?
I did some photography, yes, for about 10 years, and I was part of that day in the city of Newark with Brother Mansour Musa around the city of Newark, just taking pictures, and it was a beautiful day. Yeah, but I did a lot of street photography, and it was very interesting, you know. And I'm like William. I went and bought a camera. I think it was around the same time, about 73. And I just started taking pictures. I didn't know what the heck I was doing. But I learned. And I had fun doing it. I just enjoyed it. And like now, I don't do much. I have a Canon camera. I always loved the Canons. And I love shooting clouds and scenic pictures, but especially clouds. There's something about me and clouds. As a kid, I used to just love to lay on my back and just look at clouds, you know. So I did some nice pictures of clouds, and that's what I enjoy doing. Okay?
Hey, is there anyone else?
I just want to make sure. I see why you're so fascinated, and I just wanted to say that I brought that up because it seems like they did the same thing without knowing it. They all went out just on, I guess it sounded like impulse, and everybody just was clipping pictures all over the place. But they didn't understand exactly what it was they were doing. They was really framing history for the future generations to be able to see. And that's pretty awesome to me, just to hear how history is preserved through pictures.
I have a lot of pictures.
Yeah, both of you. And I'm just thinking, Mr. Williams.
Yes, may you have Mr. Sanford Williams. Oops.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Yes, ma'am. Do the same, Deborah.
See it cut off.
Yeah, I was. The phone had dropped. I was just. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm gonna click off.
Okay.
But I did want to say.
You can hear me?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes. We can hear you.
Okay. It keeps disappearing. Well, I was going to say to her, Brother Williams, I did take a lot of pictures. You remember when the World Trade Centers were there, and they used to have the jazz concerts out there? I took a lot of pictures there, all the jazz artists who played there. Yeah, I had a nice little collection from that. I made a whole album from that from the World Trade Center jazz concerts they had there. It's pretty nice. You know, I used to enjoy the jazz there.
Rashad, were you thinking about contributing to this effort that Dr. Bolden and Mays William have put forth? That probably could be a valuable entree or entry to it. You never know.
Yeah, maybe
I just
something
asked him.
Yeah.
As we proceed, though, before we lose out on this, I need you, Brother May, to give his information as to how he can be contacted by the public.
Yeah.
You'll slowly give us the information. I'll write it down myself, but we would definitely want to get entree to that, because we have, Brother May, we have Deborah here who's working with, she's one of our podcast members, and she's working with a lot of young people. And maybe she might get some ideas, or somebody working with her, ideas about taking pictures and preserving them, because nobody's preserving these pictures. And once they get them, they probably keep them, but look towards preservation. So this is what this thing is in the library: preservation and digitalizing it. Can't beat that.
Definitely can't. Mr. Williams, I want to thank you for your presentation. It's awesome. Just make you fall in love all over again with Newark. And we have so many fun memories, and some things are just in your head, but it's a beautiful thing when people have taken pictures of our history so we can go back and look at it and we can show it to our children and our grandchildren. And as Mr. Williams was saying, I'm one of the hosts on Grown Folk Talking, but I'm also a part of a community organization, well, actually two 501c3s, starting back my LLC as well. But I have a granddaughter, and she makes pictures beautiful. Mr. Williams has adopted her, a couple of my grandchildren as his grandchildren too, and they've been traveling with Pop, and then Pop has some pictures of my grandchildren carrying the posters, flags or whatever, different things in that 60th March to Washington, when they went to Washington. So, but my granddaughter Sierra is in love with photography, and just like she could take a camera on the phone or anything, and so she's just been engulfed in pictures, and she's the person that everybody has the phone to or whatever, and she just wanted to get into, the pictures and taking the pictures, getting different cameras, and that's what she's saying. I want this camera and I want that camera, and she's all excited right now. So just like he said, we have a group of children we working with. We have a community organization, and we're able to come into the schools now and do workshops so that we can preserve history and educate our children. That's a part of what my 501c3 does, as well as mentorship. And so it does a lot of different things, but this is just one of the aspects, and we just now started going into the school on October the 10th, and we have another date coming up on the 15th. But pretty much I have been given leeway to come in Speedway Elementary School and help to put together workshops for the children. So they wanted to do something different from what's being done right now. So we get to come in on very different angles from what we did before. So on the 10th, we did bullying and conflict resolution. And next, in November, we're supposed to be dealing with empathy and conflict resolution. So we want to do something with the music and with the arts and other things like that. So we're doing things for children and parents. So I can definitely use your information, what you put together, and we can have some type of historical day and, classical music. We could do pretty much anything we did. They just don't want to be bored. They want to learn, and they want to do something different. And I want to do something that's going to be called the breath of fresh air to them, coming in the school systems and get them engaged and excited to learn again. And so on the last event, we had 5-year-olds, 9-year-old, 13, all engaged in a conversation, giving a definition of the words and giving their thoughts. So interactively with the adults, which was beautiful, and they had a good time. So that's what I want to help the school systems to continue to do any way I can, any way we can as an organization. So I would love to have your information so that I can help preserve our history and educate our youth. Thank you. Awesome presentation. And I would like to see a picture of Mr. Williams back in the day when he was 22. That'll be one of my personal favorites to see how we teach the kids. Thank you.
Okay. Go ahead, Brother May.
Yes, sir.
The info. Contact information.
Okay. Everybody ready?
Yes.
All right. I'm going to give you my mobile text number first. 973 842 1115. I'll do it again. 973 842 1115. And let me give you my email address, which is very easy, but it gets tricky sometimes. It's my first name, William, and then my middle initial, W, and my last name, May, M-A-Y, at Comcast.net.
Okay.
See what that whistling noise? I'll give it to you again. William W. May at Comcast, COMCAST.net.
Okay.
Or you can do the same thing at Gmail, William W. May at gmail.com, whichever is easier for you.
Now, are you? Can one Google your name and see some of the things you're discussing?
Yes, you can do that. You can Google my name, or you can go to my website. And here's the website. I'm very simple and basic, so all you have to put in is WilliamWMay.net, and my website will come up. You don't need to put the www. You can if you want to, but it's my full name, WilliamWMay.net. And if you want to see some more things, just go to npl.org. That's the Newark Public Library, npl.org, and you can search around, and you'll see my name, see a lot of stuff under my name, and you'll see something called the Berg, B-E-R-G collection. Dr. Berg. Now, Dr. Berg, in the late 1950s, medical doctor, he just grew up in Newark. He just drove around Newark and just took pictures. Just took pictures, and they're at the on the website at the Newark Public Library and the New Jersey Historical Society. But you're better off going to the library because it's easier.
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm. And if you're on Facebook, about 2 months ago, a brother created a page on Facebook called Growing Up in Newark. And I have seen some photographs on there that I have never seen in my life. All parts of the city. Not my world was basically the Central Ward and then the South Ward. You got to get stuff from the North Ward, down Neck, businesses, downtown Newark, old pictures of Broad Street, and people. It is in less than 2 months. The Facebook page has more than 40,000 members.
Wow.
And you would think that you would have that many people interested in Newark, but you do. And the people who, in that 40,000 or so, Newarkers or former Newarkers living in other places in the world.
Mm-hmm.
You're getting the Italians, you're getting the Jewish people, you're getting the black folk, you're getting everybody. And everybody is in good spirits because everybody is talking about the joy of Newark.
Nice.
Young folk miss that. I mean, Newark is very powerful and very important. I don't know if you know that Newark is the third oldest city in this country. New York and Boston are ahead of it, and Newark is number 3.
I'm well aware of that. Yeah, I'm well aware. And I have a book on Newark that goes back when Newark started up to Adonisio, up to when Mayor Adonisio was the mayor. A lot of historic pictures in there, downtown Newark and all. Very interesting looking at it. But, I remember also that people who left Newark back in the day, they started Newarks in other states, like Newark, Delaware, Newark, California, and others. Yeah, they started Newarks in those places, and they were originally from Newark.
Hey, there's a Newark, Ohio, about 2 hours from where I live.
Yes, that's what I said. A lot of these states have Newarks.
When I was vice principal at Peshine, we had a partnership with Newark School in Vermont.
Wow, see that?
Yeah. And they sent me a video. I think that's at the library now. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Newark has such great history. I mean, and I remember as a kid, well, teenager, we go out of town or something. We might be in Illinois somewhere, and if you said you were from Newark, they were like, "Oh, you from Newark?" It's like everybody knew Newark.
They still do.
Yeah, like everybody knew Newark. I said, "Wow, that's amazing." I was in Cairo, Illinois. And I was there, and me and some other fellows, and mentioned Newark, and they were like, "Oh, yeah, Newark. We know about Newark." I said, "Whoa, this is back in the 1960s."
Yeah, and a lot of people who moved out of Newark, who were my age, they now really regret that they left the Newark, okay, because their roots are in Newark. And that's what you see on that Growing Up in Newark Facebook page. On the corner of South 10th Street and Clinton Avenue, it was a temple with a Skinner's
drugstore.
I remember that.
We had a drugstore right there, right? And you had the cleaners diagonally across there. And I forgot what else, but that was 10th Street, right?
Yeah,
right on the corner of South 10th Street and Clinton Avenue. Yeah.
Clinton Avenue.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And Blessed Sacrament is right across the street from that. The Drum and Bugle Corps, but that was in Clinton Hill. But you had in the Central Ward, you had 2 black Drum and Bugle Corps, the Elk.
That's right.
And the Carver Gablades.
That's right.
Gablades. Has anybody else?
I'd like to just say.
It's too late at night to get me started on my Newark memories.
Is there another person before we cut out here?
This is Kathleen.
Yeah.
I just wanted to thank William May for all his contributions. He's been humble, and he has not been assuming anything. He is not an ego tripper or any of that. And I've known him all these years and never heard this much of the legacy that he holds. I want to say that the best and the finest of Newark's elementary school musicians came out of that Peshine Avenue school jazz band, and I have not seen it replicated. The new infusion of music in elementary and high school is diminished beyond recognition as I've seen it, because I did attend the virtual spring concert. But at least there's a chance for us to get back, because there was a theory in the early 80s by some of the board members that devalued the art and music program. So it took so many years to try to rejuvenate it. But I'd also like to say, with James Baxter Terrace was part of the Newark Housing Authority system.
Yep.
Those buildings were destroyed, and part of the relatives that are in our family all grew up in James Baxter Terrace and remained there for generations. And so if the history is not preserved, it's current events today. See, what you're doing with the youth today becomes history because you're doing it today to have part of a legacy. So this is one of the lessons that are taught by people like Bolden and certainly William May, and I'm thanking him for coming on and sharing. He also told a richness of his family legacy this evening that many like me don't have. We don't have a recollection. We don't have photographs. Maybe we had them and they got lost. Those kinds of things occur. And I have taught students who come back for the yearbook. They want to have memories of the children, the former classmates. But that's, going to be more for digitizing, because as they go online, then people can, search back and find some of their own history. But I just want to say thank you for the contributions this evening, whether it be in visual arts and performing arts and any of the arts. Keep it moving, because WBGO won't be replaced. It's too much time and effort by too many volunteers that over the years have been overlooked, the same as State Street School. There are people who are mindless enough to say that there's no reason for the current school board in Newark to work to preserve State Street School, but we got news for them. And certainly by telling that story of James Baxter, by telling that story of the colored school, we want to keep in mind what is going on, because today we don't know if all of those things might be reversed. We might be seeing something today that reflects on what was going on more than 200 years ago. So thank you so much.
You're quite welcome. Now, now give me your name again.
Kathleen Holman Witcher.
Oh, I didn't recognize your voice. Okay.
Yeah.
So you know exactly what I was talking about when I said Hassan Williams and the Malcolm X Shabazz Band.
Exactly.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Oh, all right.
Well, that's powerful.
You are
Powerful.
aware that the yearbooks are all on the library website, npl.org. You can find them all.
Brother May, I noticed one thing, though. In the Southside yearbooks, two of the yearbooks are missing, the year 1963 and another year. I am looking at 63 because that's when I graduated. And I don't know that somebody purposely lost it, but I got rid of it. But
actually, I know. What happens is we boxed up the remaining yearbooks that were on file at the school, but several of them were not there, so they're even missing more current years. There are several from Malcolm X Shabazz High School, those years that Dr. Bolden reached out for and did not get at the time when we worked on the project, which was about 5 years ago. So it will cost something to do digitizing now. It was free at that time, but it will be a cost. And so if people come forward with those yearbooks, they can still be sent for digitizing, and that process does take about 2-3 months.
Well, that's a great idea, because going through those yearbooks, they did a great job. But in some school districts, some schools like Chavez, now places like Weequahic, every single year is in there. There aren't any missing years. But that school, like Central, that was open in 1909. That's the interesting thing that I wanted to ask you about, Brother May. The colored school is closed now. It was there from 1852 until 1908. What did the black children do in 1909, 10, and 11 until Central opened?
They went into the regular schools. I mean, they may not have been treated well, but they went into the Newark public school system. And before Baxter, there were others who ran the colored school. There was a Mr. King, I can't remember his first name, and there were 2 women connected to him.
Mm.
And they were in the colored school that was actually down neck. I don't think the street even exists anymore. But it was not a separate building. It was inside of another building. And I think that what made State Street stand out was the fact that it was an individual, standalone building. So just that little tidbit of history.
Well, yeah, it was great if you could come back again sometime in the fall, spring, or something. You have so much to share. Really comes from a different perspective, but also let us know how the project is going. I'm new to this, and I didn't know there was such a group or such an effort going on. And the people on this podcast know that I've been talking forever since I've been on the podcast about my Africana Studies program, which I keep. I've labeled it now the premier program on Africana Studies and History of the Nation, because there's never been a 2-year Black Studies program in the country ever on high school level, and that was about to disappear. I write a book. So that's what I began doing, and as I began doing that, it was until May 30th of this year, as I saw this critical race theory all going on, and banning books, and taking Amir Barak out of the honors history program, U.S. AP honors program, and people talking about black people learning skills during slavery, and you don't need to discuss systemic racism. There was a show on this week on CBS, and it said that the people who run or develop the honors AP history class are saying it's all right to teach some parts of history of black people, but you can't talk about systemic racism. Now, how do you talk about the history of black people in America and not talk about systemic racism? Well, I'm going to invite the young man who's out there in Dorsey High in California. I'm going to invite him to come on this podcast to talk about it. He's a young man, too. And he's very fiery about it. He doesn't get all jumped up and hollering, but you can see that he's really calm and strong, and he's young. I like that idea. So all this stuff is going on. If you hadn't, I mean, I'm sure, Bill May, you're an inventive fellow, and you didn't ever think that you would come across what I'm talking about, but you're a person that can vouch for the program and say, gee whiz, I know that program happened. I saw it with my own eyes. I took pictures of it. So therefore, it would have died unless I could write the book and keep going with it. But that would never have been. I would never have been able to tell that story and leave it for posterity. I don't know how you're going to do that with the part I talked to you so far about. but it's been a great thing, and things happen for a reason. It's not in isolation, and I commend you on your innovativeness, because you're very innovative and creative.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so yes, sir.
Inviting me on and indulging me for this time, and it's been my pleasure to share.
Okay, so with that, we're going. If there are no more contributions or questions.
Oh, Brother William, may I mention something?
Yes, sir, brother.
Yeah, has anybody been to the New African American Museum in Washington, D.C.?
No.
No, okay.
Yeah, I'm right near it. I should be going there shortly.
The reason I mentioned it, I went there a few months after it opened, and going through the museum, I came upon a section where they had a door, the front of Baxter Terrace in there. They had actual front door from Baxter Terrace in the museum.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was I was like, wow, Baxter Terrace.
Nah.
Yeah, they had the door. I took a picture of it. I took a lot of pictures in that museum. Beautiful museum. But I was delighted to see that. I said, Newark's represented here.
Yeah. Another thing, Brother Rashad and Brother May and Sister Witcher and Deborah, whoever else is on, I hope you know that all you have to do is call the Newark Public Library, either the history section or other, and you can actually get this stuff linked to you on your own phone or your own computer or whatever. I mean, I've had lots of things linked to me. So, and not that, some things that I thought I could use to augment or support my program and what I'm saying it was about, they have that in the North Library, and I've been able to get things there and keep a lot of this different perspective. I don't like to talk about things in essence without having the historical background. You can't say something was happening in 1974 and you say, well, we actually did this in 82. Well, that couldn't be. It's off. So check this historical library now out. They are doing a great job.
Well, I'm going to say this, and then I'm going to sign up. All you have to do is just go to your computer and type in npl.org.
npl.org.
Newark Public Library, npl.org, and then just follow what you see on the screen, and you can find all of that Newark information. npl.org.
Okay. So now we have now on Saturday a show with Forrest Nance. I do the music, Brother May, for an hour and a half or whatever you want to hear, jazz or other genres of music, and then from 6 o'clock to 8, Forrest has a show on, and he has a lady named Penny Hess talking about gaining reparations for black people. And I think Dr. Nabia is also going to come on after Forrest at 8:30, and every morning at 7 p.m. a.m. is a praise worship. Those are the things that we have to say. And after that, well, we're thankful for what we had, and everybody stay safe and peace. And here's where we end at.
Okay, yeah, because I'm just my phone is getting ready to die. So good night, everybody, and glad to have been here.